Anne Hamilton, installation artist. She's one of my favorites. I say that a lot. Forgive me, but I do have a lot of artists that I truly love. Anne Hamilton's work I like so much I've jumped on a plane and gone to Seattle just to see it. So again, I do like her work. There's a few artists that have had a compelling need like that for me. So Anne Hamilton, installation art. You're going, what's installation art? Some of you know, some of you don't. It's where an artist largely transforms a space and usually has some sort of statement or usually has some sort of theme. Um, Not always, but again, there tends to be. And with her, there is a pervasive style. Once you've seen Anne Hamilton's work, you'll start to recognize certain themes. Again, let me go on. Installation art describes large-scale mixed media constructions. Again, it takes over the whole space. Sometimes it's multiple items, sometimes it's few items, sometimes it's lots of small items. I mean, there really are no limits. And it's often site-specific, which means it's designed for a specific space for a specific amount of time, or it's temporal and again, only there for a short amount of time. Sometimes there's public outcry when they go to close the site-specific works, such as Yayoi Kusama's Infinity Rooms that have largely been extended because of popularity and the fact that people will wait in lines around the block or wait for hours and hours to view the Infinity Room. So it was extended at the Broad. And so at one point in time, it was supposed to be done, but it got extended, which is great. So Yayoi Kusama, perhaps one of the most famous installation artists right now, certainly one of the most popular. Japanese, she's in her 80s now. She's charming, she's interesting, and she literally sees dots. So she spends part of her time in her own home, which happens to be a mental institute in Japan. And then she has a studio where she spends some of her time as well. And she has drivers that take her back and forth. Because again, she's getting up there, late 80s. And so this is her as a young woman, Narcissus Garden. And she was an artist that was restrained. Her parents took away her drawing materials. Her parents said, you're going to do this, this, and this. And she pretty much said, I'm not going to do this, this, and this. And she went to New York. She had the support of an uncle who gave her some money. And she actually wrote to Georgia O'Keeffe, who said, yeah, you should go to New York. And as a growing female artist, it was good advice. Now, mind you, she's had a very long career and she's not always been well known. Today, she is tremendously well known. Yayoi Kusama is, again, perhaps most famous for her infinity rooms. The sense of the infinity, the sense of the vastness of the universe and our smallness in contrast. Even Adele did a beautiful clip with infinity-inspired stars all around her. That was pretty fabulous if you like Adele. So again, these are some different views of her installations. You see common themes. Common themes are definitely dots, because literally she sees dots and she puts them in her work. It's a way she has learned to deal with this condition that she has, I guess. She writes poetry. She's very articulate. And there are some great clips on YouTube of Yayoi Kusama. Event of a Thread, Anne Hamilton. This photo is by James Ewing, and Event of a Thread has a lot of textiles, billowing white fabrication. And there's also swings. A few of my students have seen this. You're going to see it a few more times because I happen to love it. Almost every semester I play it. But I just think her work is so intriguing. And I don't tire of this video clip as well, so I will post it. So again, works commonly feature text, basically words, literature, sounds, interested in conservation, ecology, preserving things, very, very articulate, well-spoken. She knows how to describe her art. Born in 1956 in Ohio, still there as far as I know. Single, no children, again, as far as I know at this point. But in one of her interviews, I loved this quote, and apparently someone else loved this quote too, because that's what they used for the headline. It felt really wild and safe at the same time. And this was a young girl describing her experience of an Ann Hamilton exhibition, and she thought that was pretty exciting. And it is. It's pretty exciting to turn someone on to art like that. And this experience, this installation experience. So this is a screenshot of some of her installations. I love doing this, just Googling an artist name, and then I usually put in things like important works, and then you click on images, and then you have an overview, like a kind of a mini lecture of, oh, I don't know, that particular artist. And so here are some images of what you get when you, again, Google some of her work. You see a common thread: textiles, fabrication, simplified forms, not complicated, not at all, really. So here's a view of Event of a Thread. Again, it was in New York, and it was at the Armory building. And again, people of all ages were on these swings, sometimes two people together. One of the things that surprised her is that area where the fabrication was moving. There was a space that apparently you were out of reach of the swings, and a lot of people laid down and would just watch that movement above them. And so this threading, if you will. So again, there's an interest in textiles, sewing, hands, anything that the hands do, that's kind of part of her work. She wasn't sure that people would swing. They did. I would. There's a special joy that swinging actually does. She says that she thinks it might be something neurological, and I would agree. I mean, it's hard to be unhappy if you're sitting in a swing. It is very, very calming. You know, maybe because some of our first memories is sitting in a rocking chair. In many cases, not everybody, but certainly many people. She earned her bachelor's in fine arts in textile design. She went on to produce sewing at a futon factory in Canada. She goes to the United States. She receives her master's in fine arts in sculpture from Yale. She settles in Columbus, Ohio, where, as far as I know, she continues. And her works are held in Guggenheim Museum, San Francisco Museum. I've seen her work in San Diego. I've seen her work again in Seattle. And she is a Venice Biennale artist, which means she's kind of a big deal because she has gone to, which in contemporary art, the Venice Biennale is important. Important contemporary artists go and show their works for their country. It's the Art Olympics. But in any case, it's done every couple years. This was the first installation that I saw. I was in grad school, and I don't know, she just enthralled me. And it was called Mattering, maybe because I love orange, but I certainly love color. And I certainly adore animals, hence the fact that I often have distractions behind me, and finding a quiet place in my home apparently is somewhat impossible. But Ann Hamilton often merges livestock, animals, text, sometimes objects, sometimes not. And again, this has this orange silk, masses and masses of orange silk. And people are free to move around the room with the peacocks. And the peacocks pretty much were the main event, I think, to a certain extent. I like peacocks. They make weird noises. I was at a peacock farm last weekend, and you know, we saw a few of them. But they do make weird noises. If any of you love peacocks, go to Irvine Park. There's a bunch of them there. My dogs like to chase them. I have to really, really pull on their leashes so they don't. Installation art uses, again, interesting material to transform a space, create an experience. Usually involves bringing the work of art into this display area. And so there are many definitions. This is yet another definition of installation art. Here we see her creating a sense of movement. There generally is some sort of movement in her installations as well. So here's this canopy of red-orange silk, this vast gallery space. There was recorded sounds of an opera singer giving lessons, and then the student copying the voice. So that would have been very, very cool in itself. So it's usually this kind of all-over sensory experience. Unless you've gone to an Ann Hamilton exhibition, it's really hard to describe, but I'm trying. Sounds are often from speakers, and they're usually laid about the room. And again, sometimes she has readers, people that will actually be reading literature, other texts, poetry, and they're usually students, or again, some sort of volunteers, but a lot of students. So there's a figure sitting in a perch-like seat, kind of like a peacock, but he methodically drew up from the ground out of a small white porcelain ink pot embedded in the wood a seemingly endless thin blue line, an inked typewriter ribbon, which he wrapped around one hand with the other, using his fingers, as Hamilton says. In winding it, he was defining and marking the negative space of the hand. Again, hands are big in her work. Textiles, touch, sensory experience, this motion of hands. I talk with my hands, so I completely get her fascination with hands. And as he was continuously wrapping one hand in the blue ribbon, he saturated the skin of the other hand with blue. Writers often have hands that have blue ink right here. Printers often have ink everywhere, stains their shirts, stains everything. A lot of you know I've taught at Cal State Fullerton over 17 years. I've taught in the arts for over 30. And we get dirty, we get messy. And so this idea of the hand and the staining of the hand, again, this is very typical of her work. Very tactile. She's often present at her works, which I think is interesting. As an artist, and this is temporary, she often will spend a great deal of her time at the installation, which I think is cool. And I like to think she's open to answering questions that general people ask her, but I'm not sure how she handles that. In the interview that I saw of her, they had her kind of on a platform above everybody. And so might give her a certain degree of distance and safety for that matter. So here you can see the peacocks walking around, which basically was their room, and they were sharing it. This is an early work. The picture with her, the white hair, is what she looks like more presently. And here you see her with a shoe on her face. It brings to mind the phrase, I put my foot in my mouth, which basically means, if you haven't heard the phrase, that I said something I shouldn't, it was bad, it was embarrassing, I had to apologize, whatever it is. And we've all done it. We'll all probably continue to do it, where you occasionally say something without thinking. So in any case, often uses text in her work, large installation, usually repetition of forms, quiet, cerebral. She's rather intellectual, very, very well read. And again, I like that she's so articulate about her work. She knows how to talk about what her vision is. And I think that's much more interesting than an artist saying, it is what it is, which is something they did during minimalism, but let's stop that now. And I think it actually sells your work more and certainly makes you more recognizable when you basically do know how to discuss your motivation. You do know how to discuss your technique. So Indigo Blue installation, 1990s, 2007. Working class, blue collar worker, also has to do with textile production, which I'll get into. So she's created more than 60 installations in the 80s using sculpture, architecture, video, the spoken and written word, site-specific works, and so often volunteers, so there's often a collaboration in her works, and obviously she doesn't do it on her own. She has a crew that helps her put this together, especially as she's gotten older. So layering, there's a lot of layering in her works. And so sensory experience, history, language in the 1990s, this had 14,000 pounds of blue denim uniforms. This was in Charleston, South Carolina. And she wanted to kind of subtly address the city's history of slavery on indigo and cotton plantations. Indigo is a dye. Our sculpture has beheld with suspicion unproductive time, things not utilitarian and daydreaming in general. But we live in, these are her words, but we live in a time when it is especially challenging to articulate the importance of experiences that don't produce anything obvious, aren't easily quantifiable, resist measurement, aren't easily named, are categorically in between. And for whatever reason, she has a fascination with textiles. And I think we all have a fascination with something, something you collect, something that interests you. And again, I think she has used that voice in her work, in her production. But it's not traditional. She's not painting. She's not sitting here there with a sculpting tool. So capacity of absorption, detail of the type, 1988, mixed media. So again, those of you who've never seen type or a typewriter, and again, there are a few of us as we become more and more contemporary and we see keyboards more than anything else. But again, this kind of glimmer of the past, I think, is interesting. Of course, in the 1980s, it wasn't all that vintage as it is now. Corpus was a work commissioned from Ann Hamilton for a MoCA Museum of Contemporary Art. And it's in a large dramatic space. Color, again, often comes into her works. There's sound, light, millions of sheets of paper that fell from the ceiling over the course of the 10-month installation. Machines picked up paper and dropped it. Speakers with 24 voices, some in unison. Windows covered in red or magenta silk. And Hamilton Biennale, again, Biennale artist. This is Common Sense, and this was the work at the Henry Museum. I think my husband took this picture because that's me in a hot pink red rain jacket. The weather was misty in Seattle, as it often is. But the pictures around the wall look like some sort of science project almost. And these are pictures of animals under glass, animals being examined, almost scientific looking. And there was room after room of these images and other items. This was one of her more complicated exhibitions, and it was on display for a fairly long time, so longer than most, I think. So this installation was a bit more involved. Room after room, there was flyers that people could pick up that have quotes on them, quotes that she liked, quotes that were intriguing, quotes that were puzzling. I remember there were some of William Faulkner. I love Faulkner, but sometimes he's incomprehensible. Certainly, if I was grading his papers, I would write wordy. But in any case, she is really interesting, and I thought this was lovely. Will we ever glow when we open an email folder? Emails are a poke, but letters are a caress, and letters stick around to be newly discovered. And I have a confession. As a professor, sometimes you get cards, and sometimes they're really, really lovely cards. I actually have a box where I'll throw those cards, and over the years I've collected a fair amount of them, and it's really a nice memory kind of box for me, because again, I've been teaching a long, long time, and you get plenty of criticism in any sort of teaching position, because everyone has ideas about exactly how it should be done, and there's 100 ways of how it should be done. And then occasionally you do reach somebody, and you occasionally touch somebody. And so I have to admit, I take those cards and I keep them. And when I'm having a really, really crappy day, I will sometimes even get them out and read them. And so again, I think this is true and very, very personal. And some of you probably have kept letters from loved ones that are priceless, especially after those loved ones had passed away. I mean, for me, we had a recent loss of a favorite aunt, someone I adored, and it's still very, very hard because I reach for the phone to call her. But I do have letters, and I do have recipes, and I do have things that are written in her hand. And these are things that I think Ann Hamilton would also appreciate. There's something about handwriting. There's something about a letter. There's something about a card that I don't think an email quite does. Around Valentine's Day, I always tell my male students, save yourself a bunch of money, buy a really, really fancy card, write something really, really loving and wonderful, and give them a couple roses, and trust me, you'll be covered. You know, it doesn't have to be a $200 bouquet. Again, if the right woman will appreciate those sorts of things. So in any case, there's a quiet sense of stillness in the gallery, especially for me, because it was a rainy day, and I was literally by myself, probably for a good hour. And I think I was there for about 3, because I was going from room to room, making lots and lots of notes. And I think my husband had a meeting in Seattle as well, so I was entertaining myself. Again, there was these areas that you could pick up all these flyers. In fact, I have a small stack of them. As an educator, I've actually used these quotes in my writing about art classes for basically a prompt for people to basically write something. And again, I think it's interesting and thoughtful, and a lot of the words that she chooses they really resonate with you. Not all of them. Sometimes I read them and I'm like, okay, I still don't get it. But again, that's okay. Somebody else, it might resonate with them. These fragments I have shored against my ruins. Paper is two-dimensional space, but as soon as language dances on the paper, it becomes a form of time. Kind of like that. Feel, for this drawing you need to find a partner who will draw on your back with his or her index finger. On a piece of paper, draw the figure you feel that is being traced on your body. Hands, touch, again, common theme. Here's a picture of University of Seattle and where the museum is. And part of it's contemporary and part of it is very traditional, which I love the mix of it. And that's true of a lot of college campuses. And room after room after room is dedicated to her work. So literally the whole museum was on Ann Hamilton. And I guess she kind of would come and go at times, but she wasn't there when I was there, sadly. And you could actually have your picture taken and become basically part of the exhibition, because just like she's taking pictures of these mammals under this film, in a way we're also mammals, animals too, and you kind of become part of this experience. Now by the time I got to this room, there was a few people in line. I don't do lines, so I was like, okay, I'll take a picture of this, and I'm over it. But again, it was something a lot of people did do. So there were these containers, lucite containers with all these displays. There were journals. A lot, kind of the commonalities of them, it tended to all be about animals. Animal fur, animal outfits, animal clothing, ways in which we've used animals, animal books, and animal quotes, and again, gallery after gallery after gallery, and I don't know how many rooms I went through. Some were small, some were large. I hope that the endeavor feels like this, a thing broken apart and then put together again in the mouth, made real by reading it out loud. Sensings, moutings from the hiding places, words entering the sense of touch, burying themselves out of their dark hutch. These are not secrets, but mysteries. And again, it was all over. There were these setups for words. And here we actually have, on the top corner, you see a reader's notes and a reader's material and a little speaker there. And, you know, I'm walking through the gallery and there's this woman sitting there reading to the room. There was no one there. That's not the point. It's just part of the experience. So reading and being read to have long been part of her practice. In silence or in speech, reading and being read to are forms of touch. The words of poets and writers stir us. When this happens, we may be compelled to note, copy, or underline, and often to share that touch by passing the book from hand to hand, by reading out loud, or by sharing the page. The distance between author and reader diminishes as the capacity of words to compel recognition travels from contact to contact, screen to screen, and perhaps from hand to hand. Have a heart that never hardens, and a temper that never tires, and a touch that never hurts. I thought that was pretty lovely as well. So again, intriguing, thoughtful, cerebral, emotional. I don't know. I just think she's really interesting. So some of these pictures are so-so. I don't remember which number of Apple phone this was. The one I have takes pretty amazing crisp pictures. I don't think these are quite the same, but even so, some of them are okay. And this is a woman's coat, 1957 to 63. You see this brown mink in the corner. And these sort of things, I mean, we inherited some mink stoles and some minks in our family when my husband's grandmother and mother died, and we're like, what do you do with them? I mean, at one point in time, they had a huge intrinsic value. Now, I'm not going to wear them. And so, yeah, it's an interesting use of them. And so, indeed, all of these containers that you could touch and you could kind of peek into, they didn't want you handling the fabric inside. But I did like the fact that you don't have a guard in every room, you know, pointing at you and telling you not to get too close. Because, you know, I've never done that. Yes, I have. So Child's parka, early 20th century, Alaskan Arctic, and all of these things came from around the world. So it was very much a global sort of things. And then this was on loan from the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture. A number of these things were. This was a child's outfit, which was actually pretty cute. Women's mantelet, 1890s, late 1890s, about the same time that Mary Cassatt was painting. Claude Monet was painting poplar trees, and the women might be wearing these mantles like this, made of fur, or they might indeed have a little fox around their neck. So fashions change with different time. Here you can kind of get an idea of scale. I try not to make people recognizable if I can catch them from behind when you're taking pictures or whatnot. But it does give you a real help of scale. And so, and then a lot of these were also taken from above because there was a viewing area. You could actually look at everything from above as well. I'm pretty sure I've seen this coat. This was from I. Magnin and Company. There was one in Newport Beach for the longest time. And I also love the wings. It looks like wings, but it's actually apparel. One of the more interesting works, the second image, is actually made of intestine gut. So this is a coat that is thin, fairly waterproof, fairly lightweight, but it's made of intestine gut. Some of the readers that I was talking about, again, some animals on display, actual animals themselves. Vintage books with these old drawings of animals. So again, all these rooms were, there was a common thread, a common theme. According to the Bible, Adam named the animals. Once mankind named them, they seemed ours to do with as we wished. Yet we were never as distant as we thought. And if we were learning anything in the Anthropocene, is that we were not really separate from the animals and the plants. No, I think we're all pretty well integrated into each other. Then there were lists. Okay, I found that puzzling. I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to get out of this? I guess maybe all the ways in which we use animals, that they become part of our experience, and also how we use fabric. Fabric was a common theme in this as well. And fabric and animals are sometimes related. And again, people had been tearing these off, and the idea was once they were gone forever. She was not going to replace them. So the idea being, once those animals are gone, they are not going to be replaced. Extinction. So do you get it? So the students would go through and pull all these pictures. And I think I was there a few hours before I realized that we were allowed to tear them off. And at that point in time, I lost interest. But I thought it was interesting. And so again, a number of people had torn these off. I kept thinking to myself, what will I do with it? So in any case, here is some more images. They also had these sound device, what do they call them, bull roarers, and they used to call people to dinner or call people for a certain meeting time. And these bull roarers could basically go out over a large space. And so there was this sound kind of in the gallery that initially you couldn't quite figure out what it was, and it was these bull roarers that were just being going. Again, there's usually some sort of unique sound experience in an Ann Hamilton exhibition. And I spent a lot of time on this because, well, frankly, because I spent a lot of time there. And then here you can see how the images of the people were used. At the end of the exhibition, there was this wall and had stacks and stacks and stacks of images of people. Again, I don't think we're allowed to take those pictures though. This is a more recent work, and this is, of course, a monkey. Now, when I saw these hands, I didn't think that they were a monkey's hands. In fact, I still think they're part woman and part monkey, because the nails, the tips of the nails look very much like a woman's nails. So again, I think there's this blend going on there. And I've looked and I've looked and I've looked and I've not found the answer. So sometimes it's hard to find the answer. And so this is a 5-color lithograph, and it's a limited edition, and you can have it for $1,000. In any case, you don't often see a lot of commercial information like this on Ann Hamilton, which is one of the reasons why I included it. Because again, you can't. I own a Ann Hamilton book. I, picked up a few things along the way about Ann Hamilton, but doesn't really market herself like so many of the artists do. So in any case, her network is not huge. I mean, she's not poor, but she's not as wealthy as you would expect. not at all. So thank you. I hope you've had this found this interesting, and we'll have some really great video clips.